about being green, the emissions that are produced by cars backing up on those streets, I think is unconscionable. I am a strong environmentalist.
Thank you.
And
Appreciate that.
I oppose that. I am an elderly person, but I am leaving this world for your generations, my children, my grandchild, and all children and grandchildren. And I'm very, very concerned about environmental issues. Personally, I am impacted. My husband is a member of a gallery in Los Altos. In fact, he's not here today because it's a co-op gallery and he's staffing. When he finishes his term at 5 o'clock, instead of going on Foothill Expressway to Arastradero, which is the usual way to come home, he goes on San Antonio to El Camino and up Maybell Avenue. That is faster because the backup is pretty much from the Foothill Expressway to El Camino.
Even on a Sunday afternoon?
No, this is during the week.
Okay.
He happens to be doing this today.
Yeah.
The traffic is not going to get any better. It's only going to increase. Yesterday, I drove to Mountain View on El Camino, and the amount of housing of high-rise buildings is enormous. Do you ever go down that way?
Around in San Antonio?
From El Camino going to Mountain View?
Yes.
Yes.
To go to Grant Road, the amount of high-rise buildings is
Housing?
enormous.
You mean on the Mountain View side?
Yeah, on the Mountain View side. So we're only going to get increased traffic.
Sure.
I from Palo Alto go to Mountain View. People from Mountain View come to Palo Alto too.
Yeah.
It was interesting. Yesterday, I had occasion to speak to my sister who lives in Los Angeles and told her about what I was doing today and the situation. And she knows this area very well. She had lived in Sunnyvale many years ago. And she told me that many years ago, they had greenery on freeways in Los Angeles. And they had to remove them to make more lanes on the freeways. Is that going to happen here on Arastradero in Charleston?
I don't think we have much greenery, do we?
You don't think?
I mean, is there a lot of greenery on the edges right now?
No, but isn't that what's being proposed? To put in islands
of
greenery?
I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's correct.
That's it.
Yeah.
Will they have to be removed at some point when the traffic gets even heavier than it is now? And they have to add a lane because that's what they had to do in Los
I
Angeles.
see. Okay. I understand.
Think of the future. We're increasing our residences by building housing. They will have cars. They're not all going to get on bikes. We don't have public transportation. I grew up in New York City. I know what public transportation is. It's virtually non-existent here.
That's true, yes.
I didn't drive when I lived in New York City. Public transportation was readily available.
Sure.
And I lived there into adulthood.
Well, that makes sense.
So these are issues I'm concerned about.
Just out of curiosity, did you attend any of the meetings that they had around this project when it was in the planning phase like a few years ago?
Not on this project, no. I had attended other meetings.
Okay.
I have had a particular issue which is really not relevant to what we're discussing today, but it does take into account what's happening on Arastradero. My husband is a patient at the VA hospital. He has had serious health issues. We have had to get him to the ER quickly. Fortunately, when he had a heart attack, it was in the middle of the night, and I could get him there in 4 minutes, which is faster than calling 911 to come to the house.
Sure.
And we were told by doctor and several nurses that his life had been saved by getting him there quickly. Because in the middle of the night, I did not stop for stop signs or lights. I got him to the ER. Well, now we have had a lane change where the right lane is not dedicated to the turn onto Miranda, but it also goes to
That's a
the
big problem.
Foothill Expressway. I have had a great deal of contact with Joshua Mello about that, and he has refused to change that. I have written many
Actually, we need to close one up so we can see what you're
I have written many emails to the entire city council. I don't know if you have read my emails,
Is this the first?
Councilman Tanaka, but this had been going on for several years
Oh, I've
now.
only been on council for a year, so I've only been on council for about a year. So if you wrote before that,
No,
wouldn't see
I wrote when you were on as
Okay.
well.
Is this the first time we've gotten a response from one of us?
I have never gotten a response from any council member on that issue. I have only heard from, well, actually, it was Tom Dubois that I had been contacting because I didn't know who to contact, and he passed my information on to Joshua Mello, and then I started dealing with Joshua Mello directly with email.
Yeah.
I don't feel that that is the best way to have that route to the VA hospital. I don't.
I can.
So there's Arastradero, Miranda's right there. Usually,
Yeah. Well, where's the Foothill Expressway?
Here's the Foothill.
Oh,
This is Gun High School.
well, the right turn lane used to be a dedicated lane onto Miranda. The teachers at Gun complained that car drivers were honking their horns for people to make the turn. And so instead of putting up a barrier so that there would have to be a right turn,
sure.
instead the decision was made to have the right turn go onto Miranda and onto the Foothill
So Greg, right here,
Expressway.
this right turn lane goes also to Foothill. So if you want to make a right turn on either Miranda or Foothill, you have to go into this lane. It's
Into the
already-
right lane.
Yes.
Right.
And you don't like that design?
Well, it's a disaster when you have a patient that you have to get to the ER.
What would you want to see?
I would want to see it back to a dedicated right turn lane onto Miranda, and the lane to the left of that go onto the Foothill Expressway as it had been for years and years.
So it would not turn on to Miranda just on the foothill.
It would just turn, the right turn lane would go right onto Miranda as it had been, a dedicated right turn lane.
Okay. Okay. And then what about the foothill? What would happen then?
It had always been the lane to the left of the of the dedicated lane.
So this thing right here.
No, I can't see
Oh,
this very
okay.
well. Maybe I should get my glasses out and really take a look.
So, this is Gun High School right over here. And this is Miranda,
Okay,
and then
the right turn lane now goes to Miranda and to the Foothill Expressway. So I would like to see it returned back to just a dedicated right turn lane, and this lane go on to the Foothill Expressway.
so it's going to cut across the bike lane.
Yeah, well, they cut across bike lanes all over the city.
Yep.
If you drive and you look around,
Yep.
it has to be that way.
Yep.
So
Now, Jim Colton, who is a resident in Green Acres 2, the
He
area I
has
live
written
in,
in before.
yes, he has actually done numerical studies of what the cars do. And,
Let me pull up his email.
and he was told that it would be reversed at some time.
okay. I just because I don't know what it was like. So for this
The right lane onto,
so that you only turn around and can
right.
okay. And that. And right now for people.
See, what happens now, before this change was made, cars would stay in that lane and not make the right turn. They would feel that they could quickly get onto the Foothill Expressway before the cars in the other lane got on. And so cars wanting to get onto Miranda would honk their horns to have these cars move, make the right turn. teachers at Gunn complained about that. And so the decision was made to have the cars go on to both Miranda and the
So I'm reading Jim's
Expressway.
thing right now. He wants to put plastic poles over here to make it just so this is a dedicated right turn.
Yeah, there is an entrance onto the Gunn campus over here where they have plastic
Yeah, right here.
right here. Yeah.
Okay.
So see, this is what Jim was Colton is proposing. He wants to, like this. He wants to put plastic poles over here.
So you can only turn on Miranda, not
Yeah, and when I spoke with Tom Dubois, he also thought that that would be the solution to cars waiting to go on to the Foothill Expressway. So that's a very big personal issue because I have had that experience, and there may be other people who have had difficulty in getting to the ER.
No, I totally understand. So basically, this is a right only, and then basically this lane here would be only for football, to right or football.
To the Foothill or to straight ahead to continue on.
Then you can either go
To
straight
a-
here or you go right here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the only difference is to have poles here.
And it had been a dedicated turn onto Miranda
Why
for
were-
years and years and years.
Why were people honking?
Because cars wanting to go onto the Foothill Expressway would stand there.
Oh.
They wouldn't turn onto
But if you
Miranda.
put barriers-
And they knew that there were never any police because at one point, several years ago, before this change was made, I called the police department and said that was a problem, that cars would stay there. And the police department said to me, we don't have enough personnel to have anybody come out from the police department and see that cars do what the correct routing is.
So if you put plastic barriers, that will solve that problem.
Thank you.
Just as they have it on the entrance to the Gunn campus, so
Yep.
that people are the correct
So
lane.
when you talked to Joshua Noah, why didn't you say that he had it designed like this?
He thought that that was the correct way to do it.
Did you say why?
I'm sure he never travels there, and he certainly hasn't been there with a patient who was very, very ill or in great pain.
But he hasn't given the explanation as to why.
Well, he thought it was the best routing because of the bike lane, but all over the city, cars have to pass bike lanes.
If you look at this dash, right? So bikes would still, main cars would still come to the bike lane.
They have to cross the bike lane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like if you're here and you want to turn right, you still cross the bike lane.
But that happens all over.
I know that. I'm not saying that's bad.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that if that was Joshua's comment, it seems like it would.
Getting back to the issue of spending millions of dollars and changing the aisles on Arastradero and Charleston, won't that cut down the flow of traffic even further?
I don't know. It depends on where. Like which island are you talking about?
If the center aisle, it would be a permanent fix. It would be so expensive that the decision to go back to 4 lanes all the way on Charleston and Arastradero corridor would not be made.
You want to show me where?
Well,
I'm strongly in favor of having 4 lanes. I feel that flow of traffic would be better and that we would have less cars backing up. To be standing in your car in traffic, waiting for the traffic to move and seeing the whole center turn aisle empty only makes people annoyed. As it is now,
Can you show me which one you're like? Where the Arastradero is a pretty big street. And where's Arastradero are you seeing that the center turn just being completely empty? Because you want to use the street. You want the street to be empty. That doesn't make
the
sense.
turn lanes,
I
The
like
cen-
up Arastradero every day to school.
Yeah.
And right now, this is a pretty good example. further back here. See, there's a bike lane on this side over here, and then there's a lane for cars, and then there's a turn lane, and then there's another lane for cars, and bike lane. This is right outside Herman Drive.
Where is it where it goes from 2 lanes to 1 lane?
Right up here.
Okay. So this is all empty and these are backed up.
This is outside Harry Oaks. Okay. I know this
And
order.
the same thing on Charleston in areas where it's 1 lane and the center is a turn lane and that part remains empty.
Yeah. Over here, center the turn lane right empty.
I had heard when this change was made from 4 lanes to areas where there 1 lane on either side, that it was because cars were speeding and it was a danger. And my feeling is that if there were police patrolling it and giving out tickets for people who were speeding on Arastradero in Charleston, drivers would quickly learn that they had to obey the speed limit. Where it's 25, they shouldn't be doing 45.
Oh, yeah. Well, I agree with you that, like, 95 beliefs walked off that really close to the but I guess I wanted to understand that. So basically just parking along the street here, right?
Yes.
Is it parking on this side too?
No. Straight bike lane.
Just one side?
Yeah. It changes all across. Like that, not every single day.
So
The other issue, excuse me, I need to interrupt. The other issue is that cars want to avoid Arastradero when it gets backed up, and so they go on to Maydell. Maydell is very narrow,
Yes.
doesn't have sidewalks in the entire routing. A lot of students bike or walk on Maydell.
I personally avoid that road because of the reason that it's too narrow. You can't have parallel cars, bikes in both directions safely.
So you are so aware
I
of the
take a route
problem.
there because there's a dedicated bike lane and I feel safer there.
Because a lot of cars come onto Maydell because Arastradero is so impacted. So that's another issue.
So actually, I actually live in one of the neighborhoods. I actually live in this neighborhood. And there's a resident who lives right over here, and she was actually one of the main proponents of having a single lane because she lives right out here, and she says it's unsafe. If you might know, this crosswalk over here I use this every day. I live right over here. This is a frequent crosswalk, and there are a lot of speeding was a big issue.
Speeding?
Yes.
If speeding is an issue, as I had said earlier, if it were patrolled by police and tickets given for speeding, people would learn very quickly that they can't speed. So that is a problem. I sympathize with anybody who runs into speeding cars on Arastradero. I mean, I understand if you live there, it's even worse.
Yeah. And then there's another complaint that she said when you wanted to make a right turn lane, there's no turn lane when it was 2x2. You just have to stop in the middle of the road to turn onto one of these roads. So now they create a big backup.
I mean, there are many, many issues with the number of cars we have now because our infrastructure cannot readily accommodate that. For instance, Maybell Avenue being so narrow. I avoid coming out of my cul-de-sac. I try to make appointments so that I don't have to get out before 8:30 when it starts because I can't get out of my cul-de-sac when there are cars. It's just not safe. I have a friend who lives on Amaranta, and on school days when she has to back out of her driveway, she leaves her car outside the night before, or she comes out really early in the morning and puts her car on Amaranta because she cannot, on the street on Amaranta because she cannot back out of her driveway. So we're impacted by these issues.
So I want to just ask you guys a question. I don't travel this epidemic, so I don't know this road as well as both of you guys. So I'm just look at this, and what's interesting is that we have the cars parked there along the sidewalk. Right? Okay, so I think the theory behind the what we call the road diet, so to speak, I think the theory behind it is it's intended to actually slow traffic down. That was intended to slow traffic down.
That's what they want.
So that there's so many schools along Arastradero, so it's trying to make it safe for speed. I think that's the driver.
And when it was 2x2, there's not much space for bike lane.
Yeah.
They thought that was unsafe, and I do think that that is unsafe for a road that
So they're trying to
2,500 students use a day.
Yeah, they're trying to make it safe for students, and they're trying to slow down the traffic by doing that, right? Which unfortunately causes maybe more
Better than hospital.
well, not just that, but also just more pollution, right?
Absolutely.
Well, I don't know. So the thing I'm thinking about when I look at this is, you grew up in New York City, right? And I'm not sure if you were there. I go to New York quite a bit. So one thing I noticed with you in New York, which I think is actually quite interesting, is you see how they have like entries? So you see the sidewalk there,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have the car park, and then you have the bike lane, then you have the car
Mm-hmm.
lane.
Mm-hmm.
What they've done in Manhattan, that's quite interesting. So you have, instead of this with sidewalk, car, bike lane, moving car, they have it sidewalk, bike lane, parked car, moving car. So it's really called bike protection lane. Right? Maybe, and I'm just thinking about this, but I'm just thinking about the feedback you're giving me. Maybe what should happen there is maybe custom accidents shouldn't be fast. Maybe they shouldn't be, how fast can cars move on here now? Can you speed them? 45. Okay. So maybe instead of 25, maybe you should go 40, right? 2 miles an hour. Now the problem though is if you're a biker, that's like super scary, right? Especially for law of kids. So maybe what should happen is, I'm just trying to brainstorm this topic. I don't know if there's the right answer, but maybe is that the parked car should be here on the outside, and then the bike lanes, maybe both bike lanes, like in New York, they have both bike lanes together, like in each direction.
Yeah.
All on one side, and then it's protected by the parked cars. It looks like there's a lot of parked cars on that. I didn't realize that. So maybe the answer is to have the cars actually move fairly fast, right? So it has capacity, but then it has a throughput. But then the parked cars is on the part that with the moving car. So the bike lanes, the two bike lanes are fully protected. Because the reason why the cars have to be slow right now is because the bike lanes are exposed, like if you get hit, it's a fast moving car that you can killed actually. So but if the bike lane is protected, right? If the parked cars are moved on the outside instead of the bike lanes on the inside, then the bike, even though the cars are moving relatively fast, they're protected by the parked cars.
But there's no place for parked cars on this side.
Oh no, I'm saying this on one side.
Yeah.
So let's see. Do you have a pen? I have okay. So maybe so this is just an idea, brainstorm idea. Okay. So we have our sidewalk right here. And then maybe we do more bike lanes here. So one this direction, bike. This direction, bike. Okay. And then we have our parked cars here. And then we have our, we have our cars, right? Maybe it's at a faster rate than 25, maybe it's 40. Right? Because the challenge here is we want to get, the cars moving slow, the throughput of the street is much lower than, right? It's 25 miles an hour, so the throughput, what was it before the road diet?
I think it's always been 25.
Oh, okay.
I don't think they'd be able to have 40 outside of Termin. Like that's just
Okay,
ridiculous.
maybe not 25. but let's just say cars go here, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it's undefeated 25, right? Undefeated. So maybe what the thing would be, I don't know if you can see this. So maybe the idea would be, then the last part here would be sidewalk. You have sidewalks on both sides, and maybe what you do is you have the sidewalk here, you have the bikes, the 2 bike lanes. So rather than the bike lane over here.
I have no idea.
Well, I guess let's
See, in New York too, a lot of the streets are one way. You know, one avenue will go north and one will go
Yeah.
south or east.
Yeah.
You know, so
Oh.
when I grew up in New York, nobody biked.
actually in Manhattan,
Nobody biked in New
bikes are
York.
everywhere. It's like
Yeah,
yeah.
Well, I left New York in 1957.
Oh,
It
okay.
was a very different city
Oh.
before your time.
Okay. When I go to New York, I see drivers. People here complain about traffic. You gotta go to New York to see traffic because in New York, the cars really don't move. It's like a big joke. The lanes are like a parking lot. It's
Well,
like
it's like that in other major cities. I have spent time in London, and I would get off the bus and walk because it was faster.
I
to
used
do
to
that.
try to take Uber in New York, and it's a big joke, right? Because it's such a parking lot there that the cars this thing just trying to get you Uber take forever. You could walk halfway there by the time Uber arrived.
I have a long time ago gotten out of a taxi and walked because otherwise I would have missed my
Yeah.
performance at the theater that I was going
yeah,
to. So
yeah,
I know
yeah.
what you're talking about. But it was all very different when I lived in New York.
So-
Nobody biked except delivery. And so I never learned how to bike.
But I guess my point more is just that the traffic in New York, people here complain about traffic. Until they see New York traffic, they haven't seen traffic. they don't know what traffic really is.
It's like in large cities. It's like that in central London.
Well, LA like that. LA, I could be driving on the freeway at 2 o'clock in the morning, and it's like the freeway is packed. And it makes me wonder, where is everyone going at 2 o'clock in the morning, right? Why is it packed at this? LA is 24/7 traffic, right? And here, I can walk across Oakland right now. There's no traffic, right? But in LA, it's so bizarre.
Well, it depends
Doesn't
on
matter what
where
time.
you are, because my son lives in LA,
sure.
and I have a lot of family members there. It depends upon the freeway. I know my sister goes in one direction on a Wednesday, and she can get there in, she told me, in a half hour.
Yeah.
And coming back, she had to go through downtown, and it took her an hour and a half, the same route. So that happens. But big cities are like that. London is like that. Rome is like that.
Yeah.
Paris is like that. So,
Well, anyway, I guess
It's a difficult problem.
and the Bay Area is, not Palo Alto specifically, but the Bay Area.
or San Francisco's like that.
I understand that the East Bay to San Francisco traffic is horrendous. I don't
Bay
travel.
Bridge.
Or just the traffic on Market Street. If you go to San Francisco on Market Street at 4 or 5 o'clock, on any workday, it is. I get across Market Street in a car. Is literally it could take me an hour just to get across Market Street. Just because it's such a gridlock, right? It's just so when I go to that stuff, I try my darndest not to drive there, just because if you're above Market Street, you can't get to the freeway. You just can't get across.
Well, I feel that public transportation will have to come into this area at some time. And I find it really upsetting that the emphasis in Palo Alto is on bikes, because there are really only a handful of people who are going to get out of their cars and go on bikes.
This has worked for all modalities, right? I'm with you on that,
I
right?
think that's part of the rationale of slowing down the cars so that people will bike instead.
Yeah, but okay, so
on rainy days, which we're not having this year,
Yeah.
it's horrendous with
I bike anyway.
parents driving their kids to school who would otherwise bike or walk. On rainy days, it's a disaster in our area.
So Max, you take this, right? So
Every day.
So what's your thoughts about if we were to go to this kind of configuration versus right now where the bike lanes over here, you have exposed bike lanes?
I think there are a lot of issues with this when you do end up going to El Camino and the big roads. the fact that this is on this side,
Uh-huh.
that'll just create a big mess.
Mm.
Like, I don't think it's gonna work if this is on this side.
And because you think you have to cross over.
Yeah,
turn
when you
right.
cross over El Camino and we turn right, it just doesn't work.
Mm.
Yeah, and my feeling is that some of the people who are making these decisions, and I don't mean to disparage anybody, but there's a theoretical way of doing things and a practical way. At one of the city council meetings that I attended, we were talking something about the traffic on Maybell and students biking, and I don't remember who it was, but somebody said, well, the students go one behind the other when they bike, and so there's that much room left for cars to go.
Yeah.
Well, if you go and look, students bike 4 and 5 across while talking to each other.
That's unacceptable. I know there are a lot of student bikers, earplugs, not paying attention, running through stop signs.
Well, I seen them on Churchill. Have you guys seen Churchill in the morning?
I don't go
No.
to church.
But on Churchill in the morning, you see like they have the whole lane, right? Like it's actually kind of actually great to see so many kids like physically exercising and biking to school. But literally on Churchill in the morning, I've seen it where like they're waiting to cross Alma, and they have the whole lane. I mean, like you see, there's got to be hundreds of kids trying to cross all at the same time. It's a massive like number. It's got to be like.
That's another one of my problems with Maybell. I like that Arastradero there are a lot less bikes,
Oh.
so they can
Like
just
a
go
parking
straight.
jam?
Yeah.
Okay, not a parking jam, but a bike jam or a traffic jam. Traffic jam for bikes.
Arastraderos, I can usually get down without hitting another bike, and that's nice.
Oh, that's because people don't bike it.
Yeah, but then 4 out of 5 times on my way home from school, I track a car next to me, and I end up going home faster than they.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I
they
see that.
pass my home after me.
Well, obviously, the person who mentioned that on Maybell, the students bike one behind the other, had not experienced what happens on Maybell or on Churchill.
Mhm.
It was a theoretical rather than a
Sure.
knowledge of what
Sure.
the actual situation
Yeah.
is. Now, are you hearing from people other than myself about what the proposal is
We actually
for
tracked this.
Arastradero,
Yeah, so-
Charles?
We actually have a good amount of people from both sides. Like they're also.
How many emails have you got on this roughly?
I mean, since I started getting emails in June, there's been about maybe 20.
20? Not 20. Yeah, 20. 20. Is it?
Yeah.
Would you say like 10 for, 10 against?
Yeah, it's a pretty even split. I mean, there are various reasons for being on both sides. For the Veterans Hospital, that has come up before. There's been a lot about on the foothill. I think most people agree that the current situation, the right turn lane on Miranda, is not right. I don't think we've had anyone saying that's good. But on Arastradero, there are about 10 people who said, okay, we want there to be improvements. We want it to be slower.
Yeah.
That's just going to make it safer for students.
Yeah.
So I think from a student's perspective, the slower it is,